Picture this. It's February 8th, 2026. The confetti is literally still in the air. The champagne is flowing in the locker room. The Seattle Seahawks have just conquered the football world, capturing the Lombardi Trophy as the undisputed champions of Super Bowl LX. It is the absolute, unquestionable pinnacle of the sport. You have a defending champion franchise, dripping with momentum, positioned in one of the most rabid, incredibly loyal markets in the entire league. And almost immediately, the Paul G. Allen estate places the team on the market, signaling what absolutely everyone in the financial world believed would be the most aggressive, historic financial bloodbath in the history of American sports. I mean, billionaires should be tripping over each other, right? They should be liquidating global assets, frantically calling their boards, and writing blank checks just to get a seat at the table for a crown jewel of this magnitude. But then, something bizarre happened. The phones went quiet, the champagne went flat, the greatest asset in all of sports is suddenly, mysteriously, unsellable. I really want you to let that sink in for a second. Why on earth is a $9 billion Super Bowl champion sitting on the clearance rack? We are talking about a prime, blue-chip NFL franchise, freshly minted as champions of the world. The market for this team shouldn't just be hot. It should be thermonuclear. It should be a frenzied, no-holds-barred auction. Instead, as the insiders began to report, the market is shockingly soft. It's incredibly hesitant. It is clouded by this looming, invisible threat that is legitimately terrifying the wealthiest, most powerful people on the planet. Something lurking underneath the shiny reflection of that Lombardi Trophy is aggressively scaring immense amounts of money away. And we're going to figure out exactly what that is. And the thing is, the estate was fully prepared for a war. Following the philanthropic wishes of the late Paul Allen, estate executor Jody Allen finally pulled the trigger to sell. Seahawks general manager John Schneider captured the absolute aggressive confidence of the entire organization when he spoke at the 2026 Combine. His exact words? "Let's go for it. Let's rip it." They wanted the world to feel their urgency. They wanted potential buyers to feel the immense firepower of a championship team ready to be sold at its absolute peak value. They expected a chaotic bidding war that would literally dominate the financial news networks for months on end. They were ready. They set the expectation right out of the gate, $9 to $11 billion, a number with so many zeros it fundamentally alters the global sports market. This price tag is designed to absolutely shatter every single NFL franchise sale record in history, completely dwarfing previous transactions and setting a brand new benchmark for what a professional sports team is truly worth. The estate projected total, unwavering confidence. And why wouldn't they? They were selling the absolute peak of athletic and corporate success. The entire sports business world braced for an absolute avalanche. We're talking Silicon Valley titans, Wall Street heavyweights, international conglomerates. Everyone expected them to descend on Seattle to claim the prize. But here is the chilling reality of what actually happened. Just three confirmed bidders actually showed up to the table. You've got Aditya Mittal partnering with Y. Grusbeck, and you have Vinod Khosla. That is it. That's the entire confirmed list. Those massive rumors of tech giants jumping into the fray, completely gone. The assumption that championship franchises automatically generate massive, unbridled bidding wars, dead on arrival. It is an unthinkably small, quiet pool of buyers for the ultimate prize. And the reason for this hesitation, well, it actually starts by looking at the extreme, almost impossible standard of perfection required just to survive inside this organization. To understand the multi-billion-dollar pressure at the very top, we first need to look at the unforgiving, microscopic pressure at the absolute bottom. Okay, let's dive into this because the macro billions only really make sense when you analyze the microscopic, brutal mechanics of the roster itself. Just take a look at this wide receiver room. It is insane. You have arguably the best receiver in the NFL right now in Jackson Smith-Njigba. You have a former Triple Crown winner in Cooper Kupp. You have a ridiculously dynamic speedster in Rashid Shaheed, and they are sitting right alongside guys like Jake Bobo, Torrey Horton, and special teams ace Emmanuel Henderson Jr. This roster is an absolute fortress. It's impenetrable. It brilliantly illustrates the intense, unforgiving environment a new ownership group is actually buying into. There is absolutely zero margin for error here. You are essentially taking the wheel of a perfectly tuned Ferrari, and the baseline expectation from the fans in the league is pure perfection from day one. To truly grasp the stakes of this $9 billion asset, you have to look at the desperate fight at the very bottom of its foundation. Consider the journey of an undrafted free agent like Levi Wentz. His journey is a strange, absolutely desperate claw to the top. This guy literally began his college career at Old Dominion as a linebacker. Let that sink in for a second. A linebacker. He transitioned to wide receiver in just his second season, played in only 4 games, transferred to Albany, and eventually fought his absolute heart out just to get to Kansas. He is fighting a massive uphill battle just to be a tiny blip on the radar of this championship machine. And the raw data paints a pretty grim picture. Just look at this. A mere 40 catches at Albany in 2024, down to just 16 catches for 258 yards at Kansas in 2025. He has virtually zero college production to rely on. Yet, against all odds, he is in the Seattle Seahawks training camp, fighting for his absolute professional life, just to secure a spot on the practice squad. This is the microscopic battle happening in the deep shadows of the Lombardi Trophy. If a player at the absolute bottom of the depth chart has to fight this relentlessly just to hold onto a practice jersey, I want you to imagine the immense pressure and flawless execution required to run the entire overarching organization. It's mind-blowing. Now, Wentz has the prototypical physical tools, right? He's 6'2", 205 pounds, lengthy, sneaky fast speed, and he's got surprisingly impressive hands for a former linebacker. But he is a very raw route runner. You put him in one-on-one coverage against elite NFL cornerbacks, asking him to win with pure twitchiness, and the reality of the league will absolutely crush him. He has to be flawless just to stick around. He's the ultimate symbol of the relentless, unforgiving standard of this championship team. But here's the crazy part. While players like Wentz are fighting for pennies at the bottom of the roster, the billionaires at the very top are facing a financial wall that is entirely insurmountable. Now, what's really interesting about this financial reality is the sheer brutal gravity of NFL bylaws. They demand an immediate toll, $2.7 billion. That is the 30% liquid cash down payment required by the league on a $9 billion sale. Listen to me closely here. Before a buyer even gets the keys to the building, before they shake hands with the general manager or sign a single player to a contract, they must produce $2.7 billion in pure liquid capital. Not real estate, not stock options, cash. Very, very few people on Earth can write that check without massively liquidating their other global assets. It is an immense, staggering barrier to entry. But believe it or not, that astronomical entry fee is actually the cheapest part of this entire nightmare. Because here is the hidden bill. Here is the trap, the ticking clock nobody wanted to talk about while the Super Bowl parade was rolling down the streets of Seattle. Lumen Field opened in 2002. It is a 24-year-old building, and the National Football League has formally mandated that all stadiums must meet enhanced playing surface standards by the start of the 2028 season. That is a hard, unmoving, non-negotiable deadline. That is just 18 months after this potential sale closes. So that $9 billion purchase price, it's a total illusion. The real cost is waiting right there in the concrete. To really understand the scale of this trap, you have to look at the modern benchmark for an NFL stadium. Consider SoFi Stadium down in Los Angeles. It cost roughly $5 billion when it opened in 2020. $5 billion. That is the new baseline of what it costs to play in the modern NFL. Whether the future owner of the Seahawks decides to pursue a massive, sweeping renovation of Lumen Field to meet that 2028 mandate, or decides to eventually construct a brand new stadium entirely, that multi-billion-dollar capital commitment stacks directly on top of the $9 billion purchase price and directly on top of the $2.7 billion cash down payment. The math goes from expensive to absolutely terrifying in a heartbeat. Now you might be wondering, wait a second, didn't they just get money for renovations? The answer is yes. Washington State approved $19.4 million in Lumen Field renovations for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. On paper, to the untrained eye, that looks like a serious infrastructure investment. It looks like the state is stepping up to the plate to help offset costs for a new owner. But when you look closer, when you really pull back the layers of this specific funding, it becomes undeniably clear that it is nothing more than a superficial illusion. Because this $19.4 million investment is specifically to replace artificial turf with stitched natural grass for a temporary soccer tournament. That's it. It is a cosmetic patch on a 24-year-old building that is rapidly aging out of NFL compliance. It is effectively repainting the shutters on a house with a crumbling foundation. The new owner is going to inherit a stadium that needs billions in real, structural, league-mandated upgrades, not millions in temporary grass for a month-long event. And as if the physical concrete wasn't enough of a nightmare, the legal paperwork they're inheriting is somehow even worse. Welcome to the shared lease trap. The Seahawks and the Seattle Sounders both call Lumen Field home, sharing the venue under an entity called First and Goal, Inc.
But per Paul Allen's estate directives, the Seahawks' stake in the Sounders is a separate asset entirely. It is not included in the football team sale, so whoever buys the Seahawks instantly becomes the landlord to a soccer team they didn't even purchase. It creates a staggering operational complexity. If the new owner wants to tear the stadium down or execute multi-year renovations to meet the 2028 mandate, they have to navigate a complex lease with a totally separate professional sports franchise. One football franchise sale is actively threatening the operational future of two different teams. It's a logistical nightmare.
And trust me, the entire league is watching this disaster unfold. NFL Finance Chairman Clark Hunt is eyeing this exact sale as a critical test case. Why? Because the NFL caps private equity investment at a strict 10%. That means 90% of the massive multi-billion-dollar capital required has to come from individuals or small ownership groups. This strict traditional rule severely chokes off potential financing options that could expand the buyer pool. If a Super Bowl champion cannot sell because the capital constraints of the league are too severe, it might force the NFL to completely rewrite its own financial rulebook just to keep the business moving. Adding to all of this financial complexity is Washington state's new tax legislation. Lawmakers have advanced a 9.9% tax on capital gains and income above $1 million. And wouldn't you know it, it takes effect in exactly the same year the NFL surface mandate hits, January 2028, with collections officially beginning in 2029. It is an inescapable ticking variable. Any new ownership group must carefully factor this into their long-term operating costs when they are assessing the true viability of relocating massive amounts of wealth and capital to the Seattle market. It's just one more enormous hurdle. And this brilliantly illustrates the real danger here. The 2028 stadium mandate does not care that the estate needs time to resolve these complexities. The clock is ticking. Every single month this sale stalls through the summer of 2026, the estate loses unrecoverable leverage. As that 18-month deadline creeps closer and closer, they may be forced to completely separate the assets. They may be forced to front-load stadium improvements themselves just to convince a skeptical buyer to finally sign the contract. And that record-shattering $9 billion valuation, the one that was supposed to redefine sports business, it slides dangerously lower with every passing week.
The trophy did not fail. The stadium did. This is the dark, gritty reality of the NFL in 2026. The highest bidder isn't just buying a roster loaded with once-in-a-generation talent. They aren't just buying the Lombardi Trophy that was hoisted in February amidst the falling confetti. They're walking directly into a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure trap with massive legal and capital constraints. Every single NFL owner sitting in a stadium built over 20 years ago just felt their phone get a whole lot heavier. So I leave you with this lingering, unresolved question. A question that is currently keeping the richest people in the world awake at night. Would you bet $11 billion on a Super Bowl winning roster, knowing with absolute certainty that a multi-billion-dollar stadium bill comes due before you even make your first draft pick? Do you take on the legal and architectural nightmare of Lumen Field, or do you tear it down and build a $5 billion palace entirely from scratch? I really want to hear exactly how you would handle this massive crisis. Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. Are you going to renovate Lumen Field or build new? This is NFL Nexus. We bring you the intense, deep dive explainers that uncover what is really happening inside the business of football. Subscribe to the channel right now, like this explainer to help push it in the algorithm, and support these deep dives by becoming a channel member today. The clock is ticking on Seattle, and we will be right here covering every single second of it.